Hey, 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 this is Sandra coming to you direct from Hayward, California, the heart of the San Francisco Bay Area, where I was born and raised. Who I am in a nutshell. I am a first-generation Chicana in the U.S., also the first in my family to go to college. My parents are immigrants from Mexico. I have a bachelor's degree in Chicano Studies from UC Berkeley and my master's degree in counseling from Cal State Hayward. I have been a California Community College counselor for the past 20 years. I provide academic, career, and personal counseling in one-on-one sessions, as well as in college success courses. In these Brown Bag podcasts, my intention is to share my experiences working with my community and my college students. You will meet some of my mentors and awesome colleagues who have motivated me to continue doing the work that I do.
Hello, my name is Monique Williams. I am currently an English instructor at Chabot College. I work with the Emoja program. I am the Tri-Chair of the Student Access, Success, and Equity Committee, and I am a member of the CCEPG. I was born and raised in Hayward, California, and I am a proud Chabot College graduate. I earned a BA from Mills and an MA from San Francisco State, but I never left Chabot. It's my home. And I have been a part of the institution in many different ways. I've been a student, an administrator, and now I'm a teacher. I have had the privilege of seeing the college through 3 different lenses. I joined the Brown Bag podcast because of the 2 women I get to be in conversation with, Sandra and Carmen. These women, with a lot of care, teach me more about how to best serve the Chabot College community. I hope listening to this podcast will give you the same opportunity for growth that each conversation with these women gives to me.
What's up, everyone? It's Carmen Johnston, aka Mrs. J, aka Queen Carmi, aka DJ Carm Brulee, here and ready to build knowledge with my 2 amazing co-hosts. I am a Black woman born and bred in the Bay Area. I am a proud Gen Xer, radiant English professor, and pop culture enthusiast. I have a bachelor's in liberal studies and master's in English creative writing, both from San Francisco State University. I've worn several hats at Chabot College, ranging from co-founding the Change It Now learning community to co-leading the Chabot Collaborative for Equity and Professional Growth. Mostly, though, I'm interested in transformation by holding space for difficult conversations that will ultimately move us all closer to a more equitable college and more just world.
All right, welcome everyone to the Brown Bag podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Monique Williams. We're missing Sandra Hinera, who is going to be taking a little pause and wondering, where do we go from here in order to make Chabot a more equitable place?
I guess we can talk about administrators' role in all of this, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's that, but there's also, you have mentioned just within our classrooms and like grading policies and stuff.
Oh yeah, so that's always my shtick. I still have to make another appointment with VP Cooks, because I'm constantly trying. I do my thing where I walk around and I start like asking people questions just to like build my argument.
Right. Trying to get more information.
You know, like we have the W during COVID was so flexible, right? And like when they showed me, like when I saw that kind of flexibility in that W, I was like, oh, like, this could actually be a tool to be a little bit more fair to our students, right? Be more equitable to our students. Because that's what we started using it as, right? EXW is like this, like excuse thing. I think that Matt Critcher, VP Critcher, recognized that even pre-pandemic, because they were starting to think about, like these circumstances in which a W is deserved, right? Even though they've passed that date and so on, right? And then, like pandemic, it kind of made a W deserved because people's lives are hard and we recognize that in general. And so I thought, why can't we keep that idea? Why go back to D's and F's?
Yeah, exactly.
They're harmful.
Yeah.
Right? They're extremely harmful. And my desire is to do as little harm as possible to my students. And so when I get forced to put a D or an F on somebody's record, it's like I'm forced to do harm, which I don't like as an instructor. And it's not necessary. If somebody gets a D or an F, for one, I've already had several conversations with them. Like, they know that that's coming. But also, it's like a D or an F. What is the point of giving the person the grade? Point of the grade. It's purely punitive.
That's it. Yeah. It's like, you messed up. Here's your D and your F, right?
Right.
I know. They need more like a try again.
Right. It's a try. And that's how I started viewing the W.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like, just try it again. Because it's not necessary for me, for one, I'm not paternalistic.
Right.
Right. And so I don't need to wag my finger at them and be like, nah, you got it, like, and have them. It's scars, right? So a D or an F leaves a huge scar GPA wise. Right. And so it's leaving a lasting scar that they keep fighting against. Right. Every time they go to like apply for something, their GPA might be a little lower because of that. And it's like opening a wound again. They have to explain it out. Like, if they on their transcript, why did they get a D or an F in this class? Like, it sits there. So I just thought they were incredibly unfair. And so when I continue to look at like the policies around, like the ideas around ungrading, Fabiola Torres, right? She has a lot of the stuff that I'm mirroring right now in my class about like doing, completes and incompletes and really working towards grading that is collaborative. But there are some students that even in that collaboration process, right, down that road, right, they're going to still earn a D or an F for whatever reason.
Right.
Maybe it's because of, like a skill that they still need to develop or something that happened in their family. There's so many reasons. Nobody really deserves the grade. I really think, for one, having to fill out a bunch of papers to explain a W is just a bunch of paperwork that slows down process. So it's actually causing a lot of extra labor when we have to do that. And also, a W is never contested.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, people are like, no, don't give them a W.
Yeah.
It's never contested. So I'm just not sure. Like, I feel like, and then when I think about the DEIA stuff coming down, part of DEIA is creating better policies at your college that close equity gaps, that make your college more equitable. And changing grading policies around like D's and F's especially, right? Saying that we don't give them here is creating a more equitable campus, right? We don't give them here. It doesn't mean you just pass the class. You can still get a W or a no pass or whatever we eventually decide it is. So it's not like a free pass, but it's like, I'm not going to punish you for not passing.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to tell you, try again. Right. I'm going to tell you, try again. And, like having things like that instead of, and having the opportunity, like, hey, just telling all faculty, give people a W to the end online if you want, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, here's a drop down menu. You can choose W, right? What's the big deal? It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't hurt us. It doesn't do anything. Go ahead and choose a W if you want. Like, really, I would love to see that on this campus. Like, just that as the start of kind of like undoing the trauma of grading, just, I think, would move us in such a positive direction around all of that.
Yeah, I think it would be so cool too if there was like, I think for me, the hard thing about the W is just from a learning community standpoint, like, it looks like somebody left, right? And like you said, there can be so many reasons. So I wish there was like almost like an E for effort, like the person stayed and they tried. They were in your class, you supported them, they did everything, and they just, weren't able to meet, the expectations of the class, or just something like that, because I hate it when like I'm working with the student and I'm like, you got to turn this in, and I've done everything that I can to try to set them up to pass, and they still don't, either because they didn't turn in the essay, or they only wrote one page for a 4-page essay, just all those things. And then you're just staring there, and I'm like, God, I have to give you a D. It'd be so nice to give them an E. So
right.
Like, I see that you're trying. It's just not, where it needs to be for now. Or even like you said, like a no credit, or just something that's less punitive and less. And then the W, I feel like, to me, is like, okay, you've left the class. Like, you're just not showing up anymore. And I think that's different than somebody who's like, actually has been trying and did their best and they just couldn't,
Right.
And a D doesn't say that. A D to me is just a D and an F is very punitive. Right. So I wonder what the process is. Can we just come up with a whole new?
I was looking into it, right? Can we come up with like new grades and names for grades and stuff like that? So they are, like, some high schools are no longer giving D's and F's, right? And so they've come up with new names for what happens after C, right? Like, and most of it is kind of like repeat or no pass or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's true, like, that a W it's a withdrawal. So to suit the person left, right? Which sometimes it's not. They're working with you longer than the semester even lasted.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Right. And they just
right. But it's just not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, having something that would actually represent that process would be wonderful.
Yeah.
But it's like, for now, just let me use my W without the hassle of like getting together tons of paperwork.
Exactly.
Right? Then nobody actually really, I'm not going to assume people don't care about it, but it's more paperwork on busy people's desks.
Yeah.
Than it really needs to be on their desks, and it's just like more time trying to process more paperwork, and it makes it a lot harder, it makes one simple thing a lot harder. And then it also, like, having that change would make us start having this conversation that you and I are having. Like, okay, what would it be? What else would it be? Rome, when they were dean, we would talk about this. And Rome was like, well, one thing you got to think about when you propose that, are some people going to use it as maybe the opportunity to give up on a student a little sooner because they know that they're not going to give them a D or an F? And so it's like, okay, since I can just give you a W, then does that mean to invest less effort? Right?
Good question.
It can happen, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, well, they don't ever actually fail. So if they're not putting the effort, then I can just ignore it, right? Yeah. It's not a fail. Yeah. So it's like training around that, how we're thinking about that. Why did we create this grade rather than a D and an F? And, if it's an E, what does an E mean? Like that there was effort given on both sides, right? Yeah. So I think just like talking about that as a campus and looking at that as a campus as a real thing. We grew up in grades, right? And so we have an attachment to them. And they mean something to us as professors, right? Like, we as teachers, they all mean something to us. And we do that whole thing of like, well, when I was in college, there was this really hard class and I got an A and I felt so good about myself for getting that A. And, so grades are great. And it's like, all right, that idea is like, basically what's behind that is like, I successfully navigated through a white supremacist culture, right? And I'm super proud of myself for it. And so don't take away my pride around being successful through that moment, right? Yeah. That moment is actually quite traumatic. The ways in which, like, having to unpack that and thinking about that so that way we can let go of these practices that aren't necessarily serving our students. They're not talking about learning, right? And it's not talking about the process of trying to learn and get through a class with less harm, right? Yeah. And I think that that's kind of like the thing. It's like, sure, someone can really strive really hard to get an A, but even in that A, if you've done harm to the student, was it, right? Yeah. I got A's. Right? I was harmed.
Yeah.
Right? I was harmed. I didn't even know who I was by the time I got my BA.
I did it, but who am I?
Exactly. You look at like a paper you wrote, you're like, who's that?
Right? It's so hard to finish, like losing yourself. Well, I think part of it is too just like not having that culture of like reflection and teaching, because really we could just try things and see what happens, like what would be the harm in just trying a semester where you did something different around grading, and see what happens, how it goes, it's like, I think there's just so much urgency that really makes people kind of lean on rigidity, where it's like, oh, I got to cover all this content. And if they don't learn this, they're not going to make it in engineers and, they just get so freaked out. And it's like, trust yourself and try some things, It's like, you're not going to let anybody slide through who you don't think, should make it through, like,
Right.
There's a lot of fear, I think.
There is. And there's a lot of like, it's weird. I've been hearing there's a lot of like this is kind of like off topic, but on topic. Like, where do we go from here? Like this fear around that, like watering down education.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, like these new policies that get us closer to being equitable, then in some ways we're just like watering things down.
Yeah.
And, it's like, that's not the case. Like what you're asking for is deeper learning, really. And asking us not to lean on the ways in which we've made, like learning kind of like motorized, mechanical.
Exactly.
Right? Which makes it a lot harder. And so, yeah, I think that like those conversations probably need to be had, because when we start changing tradition, people start and automatically goes to this place of like, are we kind of like dumbing down the institution?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So worried about the standards. So worried.
Right.
So ridiculous.
Right. And instead of like looking at it as like, how are we actually exceeding the standards? Like, how are we like blowing our students past the standards because we're giving them some agency over their education? Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So we should talk about administrators, because they're going to have to help us at some point. We all shout out Abby, because Abby's like so I hope Abby feels loved when she listens to the podcast, because Abby is like the one that's been fighting all the time.
Right. Yeah, she does work really hard.
Right. Yeah. Abby does work really hard. And so the other administrators, what do they teach? So I think we were talking about this thing of like, you come in and you're excited. Like, for example, I will say, like, when I came in and I talked to VP Cooks and Rome at the time, and I talked to him about the grading thing, Cooks was like, well, how do we do it? Right? What do we do? What do we look at? Give me a list of things I can say, right? And so really kind of accepting this change seems like something that's good and could happen. But we'd need, of course, some planning around like, how do we actually do that? How would you roll that out, right? And so going straight to that thing of like, how, right? We talked about not saying no, but saying like how.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like that happens a lot here where, you ask for something and there's a lot of like, well, it can't happen here or it can't happen there, instead of just like, okay, let's brainstorm together of how this can happen. And I think there's some like, I don't know if it's like a paternalism thing where it's like, we are kind of kept out of the dark of like the needs and the issues, right? It's like, if you're saying that they're like, oh, well, there's not enough money. Well, how much money is there? And why isn't there enough money? Like, explain it to me. I remember when my daughter was in elementary school, her teacher, the principal was actually, I was at some meeting with her with a bunch of other parents and talking about like tardies. And she was just like, well, the reason why we're so, on you all about being on time is because we lose money when you're not here, and we have to call in the attendance at a certain time. And I was like, okay, thank you. Just be transparent, just tell me the truth. I'm not a child. And I feel like that's what happens here a lot is like, like if I have all the information, like I was like raised poor and working class, if you got $20 to get you through a week,
you find a way to make that.
You find a way to make it happen. So I'm fine with limitations. Just tell me what the limitations are and help me figure out how to make it work so I can get what I need. So I feel like a lot of times that information is kept from us or like used as a way. I mean, as a poet, right? Like if you're working in form and it's like, okay, you have, you're doing a couplet and these two lines have to remind, there's something actually freeing about the limitations. Yeah. Right, because and there's room to play. And I feel like instead of doing that, it's more like a punishment or like an obstacle rather than saying, hey, this is what it is. We got $80,000 and let's sit together and feel like how we can make it work. It's like, well, there's only 80,000 and you're not going to get what you need. It's like, okay, like where is the creativity and the brainstorming and the collaboration, And I feel like it must be, I think there are a lot of good administrators here on campus. A lot of people that I've worked with that have been really positive and hopeful. Lots of shout outs to give. I mean, we're missing a lot of deans right now. But I think all the deans that are here with Bobby and Safia and Dion and Patricia and I don't know I think that's it, right? Because we're still looking for a couple new or some people are interim.
We have a lot of missing people.
A lot of missing people. But I feel like that the team of deans that we have now are really strong and are very supportive around equity issues and are just a really positive team. But I do feel like there's some places, you know, where you just get lots of no's and not enough how's. And that's just an obstacle, even for these deans to do their job, you know, when they're coming to us like, I'm trying to do this and trying to do that. And I know it must be hard, you know, especially if you're in a VP or president, because you really are navigating the state and the district, right? Yeah. All the kind of bureaucracies and laws and, you know, just everything that you're supposed to do. So I could imagine them feeling like they're in between a rock and a hard place, and a lot of that innovation and creativity kind of gets zapped out of you. So I have a lot of compassion for those roles. And I don't know. I kind of think about like at this college that nobody's like better than anybody and nobody's over anyone, that we all just have different roles. And like, how do we work together from the roles that we're at? You know, whether it's a VP or a classified person, like we all have different roles that we're playing here. And too many times that our system just mirrors the hierarchies that we see in our society. And I would just, again, with the boldness, you know, I wish we were bolder in trying to just transform our relationships with each other so we could, you know, work together.
Yeah. And I think that comes from, you know, like, if we are transparent about our roles, right, and the limitations within our roles, right, the things that are being asked of us, there does become more of that communal feel. You know, and people start helping each other. Like, how does this VP deal with this kind of like restriction that's been placed on them and still satisfy the faculty? Well, you know, like the faculty and the VP can actually work together to figure that out, right? Yeah. Actually like an important spot to be in, but it does take a lot of transparency. And without transparency, honestly, it's just leaving room for people to make up their own sinister stories about what people are doing, you know, like when in reality, I mean, I've seen most of like areas of the campus all the way to the district, and it's not sinister. It's just, you know, like, it's just that people aren't really talking about like, why are we using money this way? What are we doing? Why did we make that decision? What's happening over here? Why is there only this amount in this account when this much came down? Why, you know, like those things. And often the assumption is that we don't necessarily want to know those details, right? And I think that's a negative assumption when you're like looking at a college that so many people actually do want to work in collaboration. Right? Like there's more people that want to understand each other's jobs so that we can actually work together to make each other's jobs easier in a way, right? There's enough people on campus that are like that I think that now when there isn't transparency and there's like actually like a deprivation of information, it becomes very frustrating, right? And then it starts to feel like, okay, you're working against me then, right? Or you're actively wanting to be against me, which I don't think is the case. I think it's just like, how do you navigate, like you said, you know, like VPs and presidents and stuff like that are dealing with things that are at the state, that are sensitive, that are, you know, like all this other stuff. So like, how do you give people that kind of information, you know, like, and share it and not have it become this almost like chaotic existence in every faculty person's body, right? Like, you know, I've listened to like the people that manage money at the district, and it's like, you know, a lot of times they're looking out at things and it's like doom and gloom as they look out, right? Like, and it's like, you don't want everybody walking around with that picture.
Exactly.
Right? So it's like, you know, like, how do you give that information and also still have a campus that can worry about just like, what am I going to do in class tomorrow? You know?
Yeah.
So it's like you said, it's a hard space to be in, but I also think that the how, like going back to the how and giving information, especially when people are asking, right? That should be something that administration, that's a way to help us move forward.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? That's a way to help us move forward and to help us move some things forward and take it off their plate too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So it's not their responsibility anymore. Like even I think sometimes administrators, what I love about talking to Jamal is that he'll tell me how I can make it my job. Right? So it's like, even if he doesn't have enough time to pick it up or do it or whatever, right? He'll tell me like, how can you advance this idea that you're coming to me with? Right? Which, is at least makes it move, right? At least is helpful in trying to make it move. And it's also transparent. Monique, I don't have space for this right now because I'm doing this and this and this and that, but here's how you can make it move and come back to me. If you hit this wall, come back to me. If you hit this wall, come back to me, right?
Yeah.
And so even helping in that way is really awesome.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we just need strategies, we need the strategies to get the things done that we want. And I think that we don't often get those strategies, right?
Right. That they're privy to in their positions.
Exactly. And then that just makes you feel like, well, are you on my side, or do you believe in this thing that I'm trying to do? Or like, why are you it almost feels like you're just actively hating, because you want help. So it's confusing. And then, sometimes I just also realize that like, sometimes we just all are just having a bad day, and it's so hard where, just days as an instructor, I'm having a bad day and I go in my class and I'm not like the best person that I can be. I know that like often, it's like we're all just humans out here. And so I think so much of it just goes back to relationship building. It's like, how do we develop these relationships that are built on trust and admiration and respect, so that we can do this work? Because I think when it becomes too transactional, it's to be really problematic, and we don't have a lot of space to build relationships. But I think any way that we can, it's so important.
Yeah. Well, one way, as part of our ending of the podcast, build relationships is by sharing recommendations. Do you have a recommendation for this week?
That was such a really good segue.
Thank you. My queen of segues.
Yeah, it was so good. I think my recommendation, my recommendation to all of us, this will come out in April, and we're just like all so in the thick of it, like this is the March, April kind of thing where it just feels intense, right? So my recommendation is just really to prioritize your self-care, just eat well and rest, especially with the daylight savings time. I know I'm like totally thrown off, and, clean up your space and, have some joy in your life. I think we really, especially right now, like we need a lot of joy to counteract all the work that we have to do. So I would just say, I just recommend whatever you do for self-care to just amp it up by like 1,000, because we really need a lot of self-care right now. That's my recommendation.
Enough time. Getting this spring break is tough.
Yes. Oh my God. It's like, how much longer? Like 2 or 3 more weeks. Wait.
I love that. I think that because I'm so bad at stopping to do self-care, unless unless I schedule a spa thing or something that I've already paid for half of it, so I can't not go. Right. So I've gotten really bad at making sure that I have self-care. So one thing that I did, which I usually do, I usually just play music in my classrooms, right? But what I've been doing is playing my favorite playlists in my classrooms, and then seeing when students actually they're excited about the song too, right? And so then we'll jam together for a minute. We'll be we'll just kind of be yeah, this song's And like to a certain extent, just music in general, self-care, right? It has that kind of element, brings you back, makes you think something, right? But then it's like this connection that is not about what we're doing, like in the class, but it's just about music and just about like where they heard it. It's always like, my mother loves this stuff. Like whatever, like it always makes me feel old. But at the same time, it's just like today I would put on like my Selena station, right? Which is like all these kind of like old Latin jams. And like just so many students in the classroom were just like, oh man, we always listen to this at parties, or like, and so it's like so nice, like
yeah.
Right. Like, and so even when I'm at my low energy, need coffee, I feel like I got some self-care today,
Nice.
and I shared that moment with people. And so I would recommend that, like, share your playlists with your students and just kind of watch them. So that's my thing. Yeah.
That's such a great idea.
It's fun. I also made a playlist of the songs that they're most embarrassed that they like. You ask them like what songs like stuck in your head, or you're just like you're irritated that it actually lives inside of you,
right?
And so I made a playlist, so sometimes I'll play that and they'll be like, oh,
nice. That is such a great idea. Or just like guilty pleasure songs that you don't want anybody to know that you like.
Exactly. Like Katy Perry's always on the list,
right?
Right, exactly. Taylor Swift, all them.
That's so perfect. So good.
I don't know if we want to start saying what our next episode was going to be about, like what's to come for people to tune in, or do you want to?
Yeah, we can. What do we have on here? We have a lot coming up this season, this semester. We're going to do an episode about representation through beautification. We're going to do we're going to do some work around campus policing and linguistic justice. I think are the episodes that we have for the spring. And then we're going to talk about like basic skills and how to make the campus more affordable. What does it mean to be an HSI institution? Yeah, we're going to do this. We did in the we did a whole series on Black students. And so we're going to do a whole series on Latinx students. So and talk about the HSI. We're going to talk to some Latinx instructors, Latinx students. We're going to talk about being Afro-Latinx. And then try to figure out, like, well, what is the plan for our Black and Brown students here at Chabot? Right? So I think we're going to have a lot of good, meaty conversations. We hope to have a lot of guests. I don't want to name them just in case it doesn't work out. But we do hope to have a lot of guests on the show this season. And hopefully our dear Sandra Genera will be returning to join us soon, too.
Yeah, we miss her a lot.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's a good one. Thanks for tuning in, people.
Take care.